So nice to be with everyone again this month. We're going to start our presentation and our conversation, and just really wanting to invite you all into a conversational space. So Tabitha and I have some things we want to share, but we also are really interested in really partnering. And so if you have questions, let us know. My name is Mary Snyder. I'm the District Social Emotional Learning Specialist. And we've been doing Family Academy for several months, and just really grateful for all of you who have joined us. And thanks, Tabitha.
I'm Tabitha Ellison, and I'm the Assistant Director of Special Education.
And so we can go ahead and share our screen. Today, our session is called Building Hope Together. And we're sort of using this analogy of revving up resiliency. And so I've peppered the slides with this race car image and this idea of how can we help increase resiliency in our students, in our children, and in our community. So thank you for joining us.
So right now, in many ways, as a community, we're all a part of a common experience, even though the impact may be a little different depending on our age, our jobs, if we have kids in school or not, and different factors, but we are all having a common experience. So the Behavioral Health Group published a COVID impact reference guide that shares the impact COVID is having on families and students at this time. And understanding that this impact is not just on your family and your students or my family and my student can really help reduce the stress from the impact, as well as help us to make next steps in protecting our families from the impact. So basically normalizing the possible unexpected feelings, the unexpected thoughts, and even actions can help us increase our family's resilience in the face of this challenging time. So the guide describes how students might be impacted emotionally, cognitively, and behaviorally in each stage of the pandemic. In the first month, you can see here that there was likely anxiety, grief, confusion for many of our students. You may have seen some acting out and or withdraw with your student due to those emotional and cognitive factors. And then at 3 months in, this would put us at the beginning of summer, there may have been the addition of deep sadness or depression that your student experienced. I know that a lot of kids are really missing their connections to friends, facing a summer that was going to likely look very different than what they're used to. And we have to,
sorry, could I pause and just check in with the families? Are you able to see the shared screen? Can you help us know? Okay, thanks. Thank you so much. Just
are you seeing it okay, Mary? Okay.
I am seeing it, but I wanted to clarify and just make sure.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. And so just remembering that isolation experience from social distancing is a type of stress. Some students experienced it way at the beginning. Some are just starting to experience it now. We all have different levels of how much alone time we enjoy or can handle. And so this ongoing stress can mess with things like attention and concentration and memory. And long-term stress can impact our prefrontal cortex, causing us to have difficulty remembering details, difficulty focusing, organizing our thoughts. When this happens to kids, it can seem like they're losing skills or that their behavior is backsliding. These effects of stress can be mitigated for children through the supports and structures that adults put into place, right? you as their family, their teachers. This is where it becomes super important for us to partner with kids, to get curious about what they're feeling and struggling with. When we work together with them, we can help them regain access to their thinking brain. Brains are resilient. That's the really great news, right? And the way we respond to all the effects of stress can ensure resiliency for our kids. So here's basically where we are right now. This is where students are in the midst of the COVID impact. School closed in March, so they have been experiencing about 7 months of social distancing, going to school on Zoom. And you can just kind of think, have you noticed an increase of anxiety? And this can look like the acting out or withdraw. It can look different for everyone. Have you noticed an increased sadness or a sadness that your students are experiencing? Has your student or students become less interested in their classes or schoolwork? Does it seem more challenging for them all of a sudden? Some of what we're hearing from families is that they are noticing an increase in withdrawal through disengagement. So we've heard things like, my student got up and got ready every morning, cheerfully logged into Zoom, kept their camera on, loved to see their friends, kept up with all of their work on Google Classroom. Now, all of a sudden, they don't get out of bed. They just roll over and log in. They keep their camera off because they didn't get up to get ready and they don't want to get out of bed. Or every little thing causes such a big reaction. I don't know what's going on. My student doesn't usually, act this way. They've never been like this before. And so we're seeing as educators that kind of increase in disengagement, even from the students who were the most engaged, right? And you can see that it seems like they're acting out and suddenly having difficulty keeping up with their work. I say it seems like they're acting out because as we're talking about this is what's happening to their emotional selves and to their brains, and they're not meaning to be acting out, but that is what it can likely look like. So if you're seeing similar things, just know that at this point in time, it's typical. It's not just your student. Again, this chart helps us recognize that these emotional, cognitive, and behavioral impacts are normal for this time frame. One place to start with helping your student move in the direction of resiliency and intrinsic motivation is to talk to them about this. Help them to understand that this is happening because their brain is experiencing stress. Routines are different. We miss our friends. Acknowledge what they're going through and invite them to talk about it. And we'll share some more strategies to increase resilience during our time together today. So basically, let them in on the secret. Don't let it be a secret. Let them know, because it can feel scary to feel that way as well if that is very different for them. And so then here's where your student might be headed. The addition here is at 9 months, there could be a sense of hopelessness, which can cause a lack of planning for the future, sort of having the kind of like, what's the point attitude. We might find that we're even experiencing these feelings ourselves, right? But remembering that the rational thinking part of our brain fully develops in our mid to late 20s, we know that as adults, we have a greater capacity for future thinking and recognizing that this is not a permanent situation. So even if we're feeling hopeless, we can model hope. And this is a temporary attitude with our students. So reminding them and reminding ourselves often that this is temporary. And we can move into action to support ourselves and our families if we can kind of take on this mindset. So then here on the chart, 12 months in, we see the strengths that can come out of the struggle. We may not be able to change the ways our lives, have had to adjust to COVID, but we can manage the stress in more effective ways. And we can protect our families and our kids from the impact, even if a second wave occurs. And that's what we're going to share with you right now, some of those ways that we can do that.
Neuroplasticity is a term that refers to the brain's ability to change and grow. And there are ways of thinking and things we can do that will actually change and grow the neural connections in our brain. And so I wanted to bring that up because that's the thing that uh, feeds into our understanding of resilience, helps us to understand resilience more. Because resilience, it isn't just something that you're born with. This ability to overcome serious stress or difficulty and to bounce back stronger, it's an active process. So we can increase resiliency just like you would strengthen your muscles, right? Through lots of little efforts that add up over time. So what's happening with COVID-19 is stressful in too many ways to count. And kids are impacted by all of that, right? Their routines have been upended, their friendships are suddenly long distance, they're dealing with the loss of some milestone events, right? Like maybe championship games or birthday parties or upcoming holiday gatherings, right? Kids are also very perceptive, which means that they can't help but pick up any anxiety that the adults around them are feeling, right? Even when we try our best to hide it. So what we're sharing today will help us because despite how toxic the stress surrounding COVID-19 can be, there is good news. And there are 6 kind of big ideas that we can use for developing more resiliency in our families. And those are connection, routines, self-care, self-efficacy, family traditions, and play. And we're going to spend some time going into more detail for each of these topics. Research has shown that the kids who do well have strong, stable relationships with at least one supportive adult in their lives, right? So obviously that includes parents and other family members. It also could be teachers or coaches, any other, adults who you have in your family life that can support your kids. Especially during social distancing, though, the question becomes, right, how can you keep these supportive relationships strong? And one of the ways you can do that is to actually schedule quality time. So setting a standing date for quality time, maybe that's going to be weekly, daily, or however it fits into your family schedule. This gives everyone something to look forward to, and it adds structure to your child's routine. Another idea is to use technology for meaningful connection. Your child, you might not be able to go and visit grandparents right now or see even neighbors, but thanks to video chats, kids can still connect face to face. And clearly, if you can't do video chat, you can use the phone or text or email. There's always sort of good old-fashioned letters. I know that's coming back into kind of like more use right now. One of the things that we did in my family, we typically have a big family reunion every couple of years. We're a military connected family, so we're kind of spread all over. And so every couple of years, we usually have our big family reunion. And of course, we couldn't do that this year. And so in the place of that, what we did is, especially all of us cousins, we started having Facebook Live gatherings. And so one of the cousins would just say, hey, Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, let's meet on Facebook Live. And whoever could join that night would, we'd all show up. And that was just a really nice way for us to stay connected and sort of use technology to help us since we couldn't meet all together in one location. Some other ideas, because sometimes, you get kids in front of a camera and they just suddenly stop talking sometimes. For other kids, it's the exact opposite. But for some, they just sit there staring at the camera. So what might be some ideas that you could incorporate into these online gatherings? So you could have lunch or dinner together with other family members. You could trade recipes. You could create times where you talk about your family's history. And you could also take turns sharing gratitude stories or acknowledging the positive things that are happening.
I just wanted to mention here that that can sound really simple, right? Sharing what you're thankful for, but there's a lot of brain science connected to that, and helping your child to have that characteristic of gratefulness will help them in all aspects of their life, but especially during this time of challenge or other times of challenge. Acknowledging what there is to be thankful for changes what our brain focuses on and helps us to notice more and more things to be thankful for, giving us a more optimistic outlook in general. And there's lots of research that goes into that. And so I think it really is like a positive, almost like routine to add to your family.
Thanks. Yeah, and building off of our first session tonight, earlier, even reading together online with other family members, that's a really great way to add some focus to the online time. Playing games, like you can play charades or you can do scavenger hunts. Even some board games work really nice online if both everybody involved has their own board game. There's features now with some of the apps where you can watch movies together, singing songs. So all these kinds of ideas, different things that you can be doing um, with other family members online. I love a good dance party. Turn some music on and just like everybody start dancing. That's also really fun. So another thing we wanted to suggest was routines. And sorry.
Kids of all ages and even adults perform best with structure. I know that I definitely do. And it might sound funny, but structure actually supports flexible thinking and helps kids moderate their mood and their behavior. So, setting a reasonable schedule and sticking to the main parts while leaving flexibility where needed is one way to set up a routine that can be helpful. So we've shared some great information in previous Family Academy sessions, getting ready for remote learning and supporting students' well-being during remote learning was the name of it. So an example of something you'd want to put in the schedule that you'd really want to stick to would be maintaining a consistent bedtime and wake up time. And then something that you might be a little more flexible with, even though you would want to set it into the routine, is our consistent meal times. Meals might be at the same time most days, but sometimes you might find yourself waiting for someone to get home from work, and you want to wait to eat together, etc. Different things that might make it a little more flexible. But either way, whatever you add to the routine, collaborating with your student on their routines as well as your family routines can be really helpful so that they're a part of it. And even though it might naturally just be your routines, kind of calling it out, writing it down and calling it your routine and kind of teaching them that skill is really helpful as well. So you might also want to acknowledge that the school routine at home is different than what your student is used to. It's all very obvious to us, but kind of like acknowledging that and that letting them know, but that's okay, right? And ask them, I know it's different. What's going well for you? What's hard? What supports might you need to help them to kind of adapt to the routine or this new way of being in school? It's not too late to ask, even if they've been having a hard time the whole time. If they've all of a sudden started struggling, you might think, well, the routine's not really new anymore, but it's okay. They might not need some structures added to it at this point. So things you could add would be like a written schedule, with or without pictures, a reminder on their phone or Chromebook to check Google Classroom at different times of the day, and reminders to also take breaks. So I would emphasize the importance of taking breaks for mental health and increasing their ability to focus just as much. I would put that as just as high of importance as reminding them to do their schoolwork. And then again, there's a lot more on this topic in the Family Academy webpage. All of our sessions were recorded. And just remember that even though your student might not have needed more concrete routines or structures around routines a few months ago. If you're seeing disengagement, if you're seeing extra sadness, if you're seeing anxiety come out in different ways, adding routines and structures can really help with that. So the next one is self-care. I think that we talk about self-care a lot. As adults, talk about it, but we need to teach it to our kids too, right? Practicing self-care is a great opportunity to increase connection with your child. Everyone in your family probably needs to be reminded the importance of naming our feelings and recognizing we will eventually feel better, that this is temporary. And there are things that we can do to normalize the effects of stress on our brains and bodies and take care of ourselves. So we can encourage your child to be okay with their feelings, even the uncomfortable ones. As much as we might want to protect children from uncomfortable emotions, the truth is that everyone feels lousy sometimes, and that's okay. Even telling them that is great. One way to help kids be resilient is to help them accept and reflect on their feelings instead of fighting them. Practicing putting emotions into words or art is another great way. Taking time to talk, write, or just think about how they're feeling is a way for children and adults, right, to step back from something that may seem overwhelming. Noticing their emotions and reactions, your child can even gain back a little bit of control. It's a healthy way to process difficult events like the pandemic that we're all going through right now. So even with a younger child, you can build self-reflection skills by observing them and asking questions. If they seem to be enjoying an activity, you might say, what was that like for you? Did that make you happy? If they seem stressed, for example, with a new game or distance learning assignment, you can gently point that out and talk about it so that they can kind of recognize those different feelings. Journals, drawing, music, art, they're all powerful tools for self-reflection, and just kind of see what works for your child. Mary mentioned a dance party. That's like the last thing that would help me cope or relax. That's like the opposite of self-care for me. I would not like that. So it will be different for everybody. And help them talk about what they created and maybe the feelings behind it. And then also using strategies from the zones of regulation, and that is also in the Family Academy class. Zones of regulation is an social emotional curriculum we use in our district, and how to use that at home is on the district webpage under Family Academy. So helping your child notice signs of stress, ask them to pay attention to where they feel stress in their body. Does their throat or stomach hurt? Do they feel hot or tight hands or tight anywhere? By bringing awareness to what's happening in their body, they will better be able to regulate themselves because they can start noticing those things when they start having those uncomfortable feelings, and that can help them, do one of the self-care things to feel better. And again, reminding them these feelings will pass. When the time is right, talk about what may have created the stress, not during the stress, right? Was there a lot of noise or commotion? Did they just finish a video chat with lots of classmates? Were they working on a difficult assignment? Even though stress is unpleasant, talk to your child about how it might be showing them something important. Next time they feel this way, do they need to take a break, have some alone time, or ask for help? This actually leads us to our next strategy.
Another thing you can do to work with your child is to identify coping strategies that they can use to manage their stress. So sort of like creating their little toolbox, right? When your child is feeling sad or anxious, what's a go-to activity that brings them comfort? You can pay attention to what they already do to recharge their battery. Maybe they're like me and they love to blast their favorite music and have a dance party. Maybe they like to dive into a book or play video games or go outside, be in nature, exercise, all these things. These activities are all coping strategies. And sometimes kids need help to identify them or to recognize those activities as ways that they respond, that can help them respond to stressful situations. So you can help them by talking through it, as Tabitha described. You can also help them by modeling, right? Showing them what you do to relax. If you like yoga, maybe you can look for an online class that you and your child can do together. If you like hip hop, maybe you can teach them some moves. You can guide them through deep breathing. The things that bring you a sense of calm and joy may also do that for your child. And when you're modeling that, when you're engaging with them around that, you're modeling self-care. Also want to mention that family activities count as coping strategies. So if your family enjoys cooking a meal together or family game night, maybe you like to do projects in the yard together, those are also coping strategies. So just encouraging you to work with your student to identify kind of what goes in their toolboxes. And that way they'll put together their own little self-care toolbox.
And you might already do some of these things, your student might do some of these things, but it's also helpful to name them and say, I do this to make me feel relaxed before I go to bed, if you do yoga before you go to bed, or the different things that you do, and like pointing it out to them too. Oh, this, I notice that this helps you feel better, or, you know, regulate, or whatever it might be, so that they can think about that and choose that when they need to. And then a final point about self-care and stress. At a time when your student, again, is not stressed, chat about how some stress can lead to growth and productivity. We can gain deeper understanding of ourselves, right? And kind of talking to them about that. Not all stress want to. Stress is a part of life, and some kinds of stress are good. So like the stress we feel when we're studying for an important test, or we're preparing to speak in public, this you know, causes us to do things to get ready for those events, right? The stress we feel before these kind of events drives us to work harder and focus our energy. We can kind of lean into it, even though it feels uncomfortable. And when we do that, positive stress drives us to do our best. So we want to talk to our kids about that as well.
So we want to kind of invite you all into the conversation and see if you have any stories or ideas about connection, self-care, or routines. If you'd like to share in the chat box or unmute and talk with us a little bit, maybe you have an example. Connection in your family, or self-care, or routines. I do have an example, and I just want to say as I'm telling this story before I start, I'm getting this message from my computer that my internet is unstable. So I'm just saying that to Sean in case I drop off. You have the hosting duties or whatever. One example that I was going to share about routines is Sunday routines. My son, especially as he got older and was in high school, middle school and high school, he started to spend a lot more time in his room with his door closed. And, you know, he even started to eat in there. And as much as I was like trying to not let that happen, it was happening. And so there were more and more times, periods of time when he wasn't kind of out in the main living spaces of the house. And what I discovered was, just like on Sundays, it had always been our routine to go to church in the mornings, but I started inviting him and asking him, like, should we go and have lunch? You know, will you do the grocery shopping with me on Sunday? And he, of course, was like, no to the grocery shopping, yes to lunch. And what I found is by starting to create a routine with him where he expected on Sundays that we were going to have lunch and that we were going to do the grocery shopping together, he actually started to kind of know that that was going to happen every Sunday. And that turned into our like talking time. So he would save, like I might not talk to him for 2 days in a real full conversation, but he would have something for us he wanted to talk to me about on Sundays over lunch or, while we were doing the grocery shopping together. So the kind of like creation or development of that routine was actually really helpful to us as a family. And even now he's away at college, but if he calls me, it's on a Sunday because that's part of how he, we've just always done it like that. So. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. In the chat box, we have a comment. Apps help keep our student connected to friends and family. Things like Hangouts, Duo, or Marco Polo. I'm unfamiliar with Duo, but I do know about the other two. Yeah, that's a great example of using technology to stay connected. Thanks. Oh, Duo lets you leave video messages. Oh, that's kind of nice. Oh, so it's not just your voice, but you're actually able to see each other. That's really nice. I think we're ready to go to the next slide.
So the next strategy we're going to talk about is self-efficacy, and that's a person's belief in their ability to succeed in particular situations. So this belief has a huge impact on student outcomes. Teachers are often talking about self-efficacy. Feeling capable gives all of us, right, the courage to try things that are new or try things that you might even think seem difficult, right? And so if a student has low self-efficacy, it could kind of keep our kids from engaging at all because they're not having that.
The development of this confidence or this sort of like a sense of self, like I can do this sense of self-efficacy, we can kind of think about that development in sort of 4 steps. So one of the first things you might do is to find activities that honor your child's unique interests and inclinations. And we can go ahead and click, and I think that step will come up. Did I freeze? Sorry, everyone. I think something's a little bit not great with my internet. So finding activities that honor your child's unique interests and inclinations is one step. Then helping your child work with the hardest part of the task. This is a part that's kind of challenging for some of us as parents. We want to help our kid, do the whole thing. And as we're starting to develop self-efficacy and support our kids' development of self-efficacy, we want to kind of pull back from that and maybe just help them with the hardest part of the task. Show your enthusiasm for the activity and for your child's attempts and success, right? So it's not about like doing it perfectly. It's about engaging in the work, trying, and then, letting go of perfection, putting more focus on the process than the product. And so just a few examples of how this might happen with kids at different ages. So young children really thrive on hands-on experiences and experiences that help them understand how the physical world works, right? So if you have young children, something you can do to help them develop self-efficacy is to look for opportunities to help them answer those sort of like what questions. What's this tool for, right? And what does this tool do? So a story that comes to my mind around this is in our family, we take our shoes off when we enter the house. And so one of the things that one of my son Wesley's first jobs, even when he was like 3 years old, was to sort of organize the shoe haul, right? To kind of put everyone's shoes that end up in this like jumbled mess of a pile. I taught him really early how to sort the shoes and line them up in a way that kept that shoe haul really nice and neat. And so he was learning that from really early in his childhood. Other things that young children could be learning: dusting, polishing, sweeping, watering the plants, setting the table, obviously helping to prepare small or simple snacks. With school age children, these as kids grow older, they're able to do more abstract thinking, and they're beginning to wonder more about like how and why, right? And so also kids are becoming more social. And so for elementary students, look for ways to shape their understanding of different concepts, right? And encourage them to try more complicated tasks. So I was on Facebook the other night, and one of my good friends from high school, she has a student in the 4th grade, and she shared a couple of pictures. And I messaged her right away. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this presentation with my families, and can I share the pictures of your student? And so she was like, yeah, of course. So this is my friend's student child. She's in the 4th grade, and here she is learning how to bake a cake. And the next picture is her sorting clothes and starting to do the laundry. So she's learning how to do the laundry. And I couldn't believe the perfect timing. So these are a couple of examples. And I actually told Tabitha, I'm like, everyone is so tired and over the Wesley stories. Like, I need to throw in a couple other stories. So I was glad that my friend posted these. So some other things that an elementary student could be engaged in doing: maybe taking care of pets, wrapping presents, doing some gardening. Kids can, thanks. Kids can help to plan one of those virtual family get-togethers, right? And even asking our kids to teach us how to do something.
And then for adolescents, they're trying to figure out how they fit into society and can make a difference. So you can guide them toward activities in which they can shape and improve something on a grander scale to increase self-efficacy. So a few examples of this would be like planning an outing for the family, helping with the shopping list and even budgeting, planning and preparing a simple meal. And I would say start this young. All 3 of my children are adults, and they're all way better cooks than I am. And so it's a real benefit when they're older, I'll just say. And it has been for a long time because I started them real young. Identifying a need in the community and then designing a plan to address it is another idea. Inventing a new process or gizmo or something to improve household chores and routines is another thing that you could do with adolescents.
In times of uncertainty, family traditions really give children connection and stability that they crave. And so we are encouraging you to maintain traditions that you've had for a long time, right? Things might feel different this year because we can't have out of town visitors or we can't have big parties, but cooking a special meal or reading the same stories, putting up the decorations, even though we might not feel like it, right? These are things that can help your child feel the love and security that those routines signal, right? So for us, for many families, it's really important to celebrate your heritage, right? Baking traditional recipes, playing traditional music, looking up pictures and videos of famous places.
One of the things that I'll go back to the cooking, my kids are half Korean. And so I spent a lot of time like learning how to cook Korean food, having them teach me how to cook Korean food, making sure they know how, and like learning that together as a way to like celebrate their heritage, and listening to lots of K-pop and Korean rap music as well, even though I can't understand it.
Yeah, and samgyeopsal is one of my favorite meals, so I'm so glad that your kids can cook that really well. So, sharing stories from your own childhood, right, including the ups and downs, that's another way that we can celebrate our heritage. And so, starting new traditions, maybe family game night or movie night is something new to your family, and now you're realizing you need it and you have time for that. When Wesley was a teenager, I started calling it forced family fun. At first it was forced, and then as we kind of like learned that we enjoyed each other, it became more of a tradition that we had, that we would play certain games during different celebrations and things. So a family talent show, or walks after dinner. It doesn't, so the reason I'm adding in just like walks and bike rides or hikes, even developing service projects or volunteering together. I don't want us to feel like they have to be this like, big family traditions. They don't have to be huge, big things. They can be small things that just add security and predictability, and they kind of anchor us, right? Like when I'm with my family, we take walks after dinner. Something that simple can really be helpful to kids. And I also wanted to mention play, especially unstructured playtime really gives kids opportunities for the things we've talked about today, right? Play creates opportunities for connection, for boosting self-confidence. It gives kids space to express their feelings. Play can engage the prefrontal cortex in planning and decision-making, and just kind of throwing it out there for us as adults that play is also a form of self-care for us. We need to give ourselves permission to play and enjoy as well. So now I'm just inviting you into the conversation again. If you have stories, I have a ton of stories, so I have more examples. But if you have any that you'd like to share in the chat box, or if you'd like to unmute, what are some ways you've created opportunities for your kids to develop self-efficacy, or what are some family traditions or ways that you play together?
I just thought of another tradition my family has. It's breakfast in bed on birthdays. And my oldest son is married, and his wife really appreciates that I embedded that in him, because she gets treated real well on her birthday. And it's because his whole life he's had breakfast in bed, and yeah, it's fun.
In my as Wesley, in my family, it's really important for us to do service work, volunteering work, and that's something that was really important to my father, and really he passed that to me. And so when Wesley was in high school and he had his driver's license, um, I, he started to take the food that was collected at our church on Sundays. As people would come to church, they would drop the food in these baskets. And Wesley took on the responsibility of transporting all of that food from our church to the local food bank. And that was something he started to do every week, and didn't need prompting or, support from me after, the first couple of times. And really, it was me who needed to develop trust in his self-efficacy that he was actually doing it every week, right? And so that we know that as kids get older and they get their driver's license, they develop more independence, but he was also developing this sense of self-efficacy and confidence in his own ability to contribute and support the community. So that was another really great, I think, way of him developing self-efficacy. Oh yeah, a haunted gingerbread house. Oh, that's fun for Halloween. And that can be something that you guys do. Doesn't even have to be every year, but for sure at Halloween time, right? You could do it even more often. Really cool. And you probably enjoyed it as a delicious treat later. Thanks for sharing. This is another great example of a
Fun.
family tradition. Yeah. Going camping for Thanksgiving, something you also did last year, and cooking traditional food outside in the Dutch oven. That's a really nice twist on it. Yeah. I agree. It's in some ways relieving a lot of stress for you to get out of the house and do Thanksgiving in the wilderness. For others of us, it might increase the stress, but I can see how that would be relaxing for a lot of families. So.
I think especially right now, it's like everybody home, if people are at work or anything, and like being stuck in the house when you feel that way all the time, it would be great.
Yeah, really nice. Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah. I love this. Another connection to our reading family academy session, right? Download your ebooks before you get out into the wilderness. I love it. Yes. Thank you for that, Anne. Okay, so just kind of get moving into the closing of tonight's learning. Resilience is a skill you can help your child build. It comes from kids having the tools and the confidence to solve problems, to overcome challenges, to kind of pick themselves up from disappointment and emerge stronger, braver, more optimistic. Many children, especially young children, they have a lot of natural resilience, but resilience can also be strengthened like a muscle or a skill. Just remembering that our brains are plastic. And what that means is that we have the ability to grow new neural connections. And resiliency is developed through a belief in the possibilities of our brains and our bodies, right? And through the actions and the support that's offered by our families and by our community. So we've shared a lot with you today, and you might be asking yourself, like, whew, where do I start, right? How do I get myself started? The first thing I want to encourage you to do is to check in with yourself. Be sure to take care of your own mental, emotional, physical health during this time. And then start small. Kids learn skills for resilience with help from adults, right? And we call this process scaffolding, right? We build new experiences and skills on top of other experiences and skills that kids have. And so we don't have to try to do everything, right? Tabitha and I went through kind of a lot of content tonight. You don't have to do everything we described like next week, right? Focus on resiliency. We don't want to add more stress to your family life. We want the ideas to kind of support you and to help you. So start small and be patient with yourself and be patient with your child, right? No one was prepped for life during a pandemic. But if you can show your child that you're sort of rolling with it, then they'll learn that they can too. And so I'm just going to close with a couple of just like fun little reminders. Just a word to all of us, all of you families, you're amazing and you got this, you can do it. So thank you so much, everyone, for being with us and sharing some of your experiences. And, you know, just really thankful to be part of a community that is focused on, you know, doing everything we can to help our kids. So Tabitha and I have put our email addresses here on this last slide. So if you do want to reach out with any other questions or suggestions for future family academies, let us know. Great, thanks for saying that, Zoom fatigue. I'm writing it down. It's yeah, 4:30 and we are feeling a little Zoom fatigue. So that makes sense as a concern for kids. Yeah. And if you have any can you help me understand what you're experiencing or what you might like us to address in that specifically?
Hi, Mary. Thanks. So our student, she's doing actually pretty great managing her online classes, but anything to do with outside school activities, if she finds out it's on a virtual platform, she she becomes immediately wary, and it's just uninterested.
I don't understand.
Okay, so and I think this is probably true for a lot of kids, willing to engage because it's school and they know school is important. School, but then they don't have the energy to engage through Zoom in other activities.
Yes, that's correct. And we're just trying to keep her, you know, just connected and engaged and still interested in pursuing activities. Yeah, but she just, at this moment, she seems kind of disinterested, and we don't want to push it. We don't want to, you know, cause anxiety, because we do see that among her peers.
Thank you so much for raising that as a concern and a possible topic for future sessions. Yeah. Yes, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. The video from tonight's session will be on our Family Academy webpage very soon, along with some additional resources from both of tonight's sessions. And we're always available for contact. So let us know if there's anything else we can do to help you or support you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.